That night was one of the worst storms of the year. The wind beat the windows as if trying to enter, and the sound of the rain against the roof was loud enough to drown out any other noise. I lived alone in a single-story house in a quiet neighborhood in the countryside of North Carolina, and I was lying on the couch watching TV when I heard the first knocks on the front door. They were firm, rhythmic, as if someone really expected an answer. I looked at the clock on the wall, 11:02 a.m. I was surprised because no one showed up there at that time, even more so with that rain. I waited a few seconds to see if it would stop, but the beats came back, more insistent. I thought about looking out the window, but the curtain swayed with the wind coming in through the cracks, and the noise of the water running through the gutters made everything confusing. I stood there standing in the middle of the room trying to hear better. When the sound suddenly stopped, I felt an immediate relief. I went back to the couch and tried to convince myself that it was just some deceived neighbor, or maybe the wind hitting the loose wood of the porch. But before I could even sit down, I heard another sound coming from the back, the metallic creak of the gate being opened slowly. I ran to the kitchen, barefoot, and slipped a little on the wet floor that the wind had left dripping through the cracks of the window. The light from the back balcony was on. The raindrops hit the glass hard, and it was there between one thunder and another that I saw him. A man, with the hood of a dark jacket covering half of his face, was standing next to the open gate. He looked straight at the back door with his hand on the doorknob, trying to force the entrance. For a second, I thought my eyes were deceiving because of the flashing light, but the sound of the metal moving confirmed. He was turning the latch. My body reacted before the head understood. I ran to the table and took the cell phone, my hands shaking so much that I almost dropped it. I called the police and whispered the address, trying to speak as low as possible. While explaining what I was seeing, I heard another sound, the noise of the gate knocking again as if someone pushed it to close. I looked back at the window, and the man was no longer there. Only the lights swinging with the wind and the heavy rain. For a few seconds, I thought he had left, until I noticed the detail that made me freeze. The doorknob was still moving, turning slowly, as if someone on the other side was testing the lock. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, observing the slow movement of the doorknob. The noise of the rain was so loud that it swallowed almost all the sound, but you could hear the metal scratching the wood, insistent. I turned off the kitchen lights and took 2 steps back, trying not to make noise. The heart beat so fast that it seemed to echo inside the head. On the phone, the police attendant kept talking, asking me to get away from the door and wait for the car. I agreed, still looking at that minimal, hypnotic movement, until he suddenly stopped. The doorknob remained motionless. The rain was still heavy, and for a moment I thought everything was over. I took a knife from the drawer and hid behind the counter with my cell phone in my hand and my gaze fixed on the door. Time didn't seem to pass. With each thunder, the flash illuminated the window glass, revealing the silhouette of the backyard and the reflection of the accumulated water. The storm made the wind push the fence, and the snats made me jump in fright. When I finally heard the distant sound of the siren, I felt my body relax a little. But even before the noise approached, I noticed something different. The back gate was open again. I ran to the window and looked out, trying to see something beyond the rain curtain. The light on the balcony flashed with the wind, but you could see. The gate swayed slowly, hitting the stop. On the floor, the mud in the backyard reflected the lightning, and it was in the middle of that intermittent glow that I noticed. There were marks. Deep footprints, newly made, going from the gate to the sidewall as if someone had crossed the backyard during the storm. The pattern of the footprints was irregular, as if the person had run or stumbled on the wet earth. The siren was approaching, mixing with the sound of the rain. I went to the living room and unlocked the front door, still holding the cell phone tightly. When the 2 policemen came in, the first thing they said was for me to stay inside and not turn on any more lights. They went straight to the back, flashlights in hand, and I stood still in the hallway, trying to hear what they were saying. I could only hear one of them shouting something like, "Out here!" Then, silence. I was waiting for some feedback, but instead I heard the sound of the rain decrease and the light creak of the gate being pushed again. The sound of the gate moving made my whole body freeze. I called for the police, but no one answered. I only heard the sound of the rain beating and the wind pushing the fence. I took the flashlight from the counter and lit it, the light shaking along with my hand. When I lit the backyard, the gate was open again, swinging to the rhythm of the wind. The footprints in the mud now seemed cooler. You could see the water accumulated in them, forming small puddles. There was none of the police officers in sight, only the distant flash of the lanterns disappearing among the trees near the wall. I was undecided between running away or locking everything up again. Before I did anything, I heard the sound of something scratching the outside wall, very close to the kitchen window. It was a dry, constant noise, as if someone dragged something metallic. I walked my back to the corridor and hid behind the wall, my heart racing. I called the emergency number again, trying to explain what was happening. The attendant only managed to say, "The car's already there, sir," before the call dropped. I ran to the living room, closed all the curtains, and waited. A thunder broke so close that the window glass vibrated, and among the flash I saw the shadow of a person standing in the backyard, looking at the house. The light of lightning disappeared quickly, and for a moment I thought I had imagined. But then another one came, and this time I saw it clearly. The man was still there. The rain fell so hard that you could barely distinguish his face, but the hood of the dark jacket still covered his head, and his shoulders were soaked. He was facing me, completely motionless. A few meters from the window, I could see the steam of his breath mixing with the rain. When I tried to turn on the flashlight again, the light failed. In the darkness, I heard a metallic snap, the back door handle moving again. I took a step back and slipped, hitting my shoulder on the wall. The sound was loud, and soon after came another. 3 firm knocks on the door. Slowly, almost rhythmic. With each beat, the wood vibrated. I felt the cold floor under my bare feet and realized that the light on the balcony had completely gone out. Only the flashes of lightning remained, illuminating the backyard for fractions of a second. In the last one, the man was no longer there. The door was quiet without any sound. I ran to the room and locked the door, trying to breathe. The police had not yet returned, and the sound of the rain now seemed to come from inside the house. I was completely motionless for a few minutes, leaning against the bedroom wall, listening to the sound of water running through the corners of the house. Each snap of the roof made me hold my breath. I took my cell phone to try to call the police again, but the screen had no signal. No service, no bar. That's when I heard a muffled sound coming from the corridor. Slow, heavy steps sinking on the wet wooden floor. It wasn't the sound of the rain, it was the sound of someone walking inside. The neighbor's dog started barking in despair, and that only confirmed that I wasn't imagining. I bent down and looked through the bottom crack of the door. The corridor was dark, but you could see the reflection of the water accumulated on the floor, and something moving slowly. A figure passed right in front of the door, tall, with his clothes dripping. I held my breath, trying not to make the slightest noise. The sound of footsteps stopped exactly in front of the bedroom door. The doorknob turned slightly, but it didn't open. Then, total silence, until a new thunder lit up the entire house for a second, and in that flash I saw, through the crack, a pair of clay-covered boots turned in my direction. I was completely still, with my body locked and short of breath. The boots didn't move for long seconds. The rain was beating hard outside, but inside the house the sound seemed muffled, as if the walls were sucking the air. The doorknob moved again, this time more slowly, and the sound of the metal creaking seemed to drag throughout the house. I knew the lock wouldn't last long if he forced it. I lowered my head, trying to think of something, but panic took over. When the noise stopped, I thought he had left. That's when I noticed the sound of the rain had decreased, but the drops were still dripping on the other side of the door. The wood was damp, dripping. I touched my ear, trying to understand, and I heard something that made me freeze. Breathing. Slow, rhythmic, a few centimeters from me. The man was standing on the other side, breathing heavily. I stood there frozen, with no courage to scream. After a few seconds, he did something that gave me goosebumps from head to toe. He gave 3 light knocks on the door, almost gentle, and stopped. Nothing else. No step, no sound. I waited minutes, maybe more than an hour, until I heard the police sirens approaching again. When I finally left the room with them, the back gatey. Story 2. The rain fell so hard that the windshield wipers barely can handle it. I drove slowly, attentive to the yellow line on the asphalt, trying to keep the car inside the lane while the wind shook the vehicle. It was almost 11:30 at night and the road was completely empty. Only once in a while did I see the distant glow of a lighthouse getting lost in the fog. That's when I noticed a couple of lights approaching behind me. High headlights, white, cutting the rain. I thought it was someone in a hurry wanting to overtake, but the car was at a constant distance without trying to approach. I drove for several kilometers like this. I slowed down and the car slowed down too. I accelerated a little, and he did the same. I couldn't see the model because of the rain, but it looked like a white sedan. The strangest thing is that even with all that water, his headlights remained strong, clear, without the slightest tremor. The hands began to sweat on the steering wheel, and I realized that I was tense. The road went straight with no side exit, and the only nearby city was about 15 minutes away. When I finally saw a lit gas station ahead, I decided to stop. I turned to the entrance of the gas station, and the sound of the rain hitting the metal awning was so loud that it muffled the engine. I parked near the pumps and waited a few seconds, watching the white car through the rearview mirror. He didn't enter. He stood on the other side of the road, exactly in front of the gas station. The headlights remained on for a while, pointed directly at me. The brightness reflected in the puddles of water and made my car's cabin look full of light. I stood there holding the steering wheel, not knowing whether to leave or wait. After almost a minute, the lights went out. I sighed with relief but kept watching. The rain was so intense that the windshield seemed covered by a veil. I entered the convenience store, more to feel safe than to buy anything. The cashier, a new guy, asked if everything was okay. I overlooked that a car was following me from the road. He looked outside and shrugged. "It must be someone waiting for the rain to pass," he said. I was leaning against the counter watching through the blurred glass, and there he was. The white car, still in the same place, stopped, completely motionless, without lights, without sound. Time didn't seem to pass. I spent almost 20 minutes inside the store just watching that car stopped in the dark. The rain hit hard on the windows, and with each lightning, the reflection of the car appeared clear for an instant, revealing that it was still there, at the same point, with the hood facing the direction of the station. The employee began to look at me strangely, perhaps thinking that I was exaggerating. I decided to ask to see the external cameras, just to make sure I wasn't getting paranoid. He hesitated but ended up taking me to the monitor. The video showed the road ahead, the torrential rain and the gas station lights reflecting on the wet track. And there was the white car, stopped, with the engine off and the headlights off. The time in the recording was 11:46 p.m., the same time I had entered. What made me freeze, however, was another detail. In the image, no movement, no water hitting, no windshield wiper reflection. The car seemed completely dry, as if the rain just didn't hit it. I looked out the window again and saw only the darkness of the road. The car was no longer there. The employee also looked outside, confused, and then at me. "Did you just disappear?" he asked, and I could only shake my head. I went to the glass door and leaned my forehead against the cold glass, trying to see through the rain. The road was deserted, illuminated only by the lights of the post reflecting in the puddles of water. No sign of headlights moving away, no recent tire marks. I waited a while hoping to see something move, but nothing happened. I went back to the counter and the employee was still staring at the monitor. "Look at this," he said, returning a few seconds in the recording. In the video, the car was still there, parked across the street. The image clearly showed the white contour of the vehicle, but there was a detail that I had not noticed before. Inside it, there was a silhouette. Someone sitting in the driver's seat, motionless, facing the camera. The employee paused the video, and we both looked without saying anything. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, didn't seem to breathe. I was just there, completely motionless, while the rain passed straight without leaving a drop on the glass. In the corner of the screen, the clock showed 11:58 p.m. I looked out the window again and saw, reflected in the glass of the store, the same white car stopped right behind mine, in the parking lot. For a moment, my whole body locked. The employee noticed by my expression and turned around at the same time. The reflection was still there, clear on the glass of the store, The white contour of the car stopped a few meters away, the hood facing the door. He ran to the entrance and looked outside, but there was nothing. The rain kept falling heavily and the parking lot was empty, only the puddles reflecting the yellow lights of the awning. "I saw it, I swear I did," was all I could say, but the voice came out choked. The employee seemed to believe me because he didn't answer anything. He just locked the automatic door and turned his gaze to the monitor. Rewinded the recording again. In the images, the white car remained at the same point as before on the road, but the clock marked 12:02 a.m., minutes after I saw the reflection on the glass. It was as if the cameras showed something that was still happening outside, but in another time. The sensation was impossible to describe. A knot in the stomach, the head spinning. I asked him to advance the video. When he did that, the image shook and froze. In the last frame, the car was still there with the engine off and the headlight off, but the silhouette inside had turned its face looking straight at the camera. Story 3. It was 1 in the morning and the shift was calm as always. I worked alone at a gas station in the Texas countryside, one of those 24-hour open that almost never received customers after midnight. The constant sound of the refrigerator and the buzzing of the lamps were what kept me awake. It was in this silence that he first appeared, a tall, thin man, always wearing the same beige coat, even in the heat. I entered at exactly 2 o'clock every morning. I bought random things: adhesive tape, a flashlight, batteries, sometimes even rope. He never looked at me properly. I just put things on the counter and said credit, always with the same dry voice without an accent that I could identify. After a few weeks, it was already impossible not to notice his routine. The car, an old white sedan, always parked in the same place, under the light of the pole. He never stayed more than 3 minutes in the store, and each time he brought a different item. One night, I tried to start a conversation asking if I worked on any farm in the region, but he just raised his eyes, stared at me for a second, and repeated, "Credit." That made me uncomfortable, but soon he paid and left, disappearing in the thin rain that was starting to fall outside. I didn't think about it anymore until a few weeks later, when he came back. But this time, something was different. It was 2 and 4 in the morning when the automatic door opened, making the sensor emit that usual high-pitched sound. The man entered in a hurry, but with a strange way. He seemed panting. The clothes were sweaty, the hair glued to the forehead, and the hand trembled when he put the items on the counter. Another flashlight, a pack of batteries, and a bottle of water. This time, he didn't say anything. He just swiped the card, took the bag, and left, almost stumbling at the door. The sound of his wet boots against the floor echoed in my head for a few seconds. When I looked outside, he was already across the street. I was watching through the window. He was standing in the rain, motionless, holding the flashlight he had just bought. The light suddenly turned on, pointing straight to the store. He didn't move. It just stood there, with the beam of light shaking slightly in the glass, reflecting the interior of the post. For a moment, I thought he was trying to signal something, maybe asking for help. But the way the flashlight remained fixed on me gave me a different feeling. It was as if he wasn't looking for help, but watching what was happening inside. That light made me restless. She crossed the glass and formed a perfect circle on the floor of the store, right in front of me. The rain hitting the windows made everything seem even quieter, and the buzz of the freezer behind the counter seemed louder than ever. I watched the man for a few minutes, hoping he would just leave, but he was still there, motionless, with the flashlight pointed straight at me. When I took a step to the side, the beam followed my movement. There was no doubt. He knew exactly where I was. I took the cashier's phone and dialed the local sheriff's number. While waiting to answer, I turned my eyes to the window, but the man was no longer there. The beam of light had disappeared and the noise of the rain seemed to have decreased a little. For a second, I thought he had left. When the police attendant answered, I began to explain what had happened, but something in the corner of my vision made me stop. The light of the flashlight reappeared, now coming from a more distant point between the erased poles, as if he had retreated and continued to watch me from there. The police attendant asked me to lock the door and stay inside until the car arrives. I did exactly that. I ran to the entrance, lowered the metal lock, and turned off the front lights. The post was almost all in the dark, only with the weak brightness of the machines and refrigerators illuminating the environment. Even so, the lantern beam still crossed the rain and hit directly on the glass. That made me shiver. It was as if he knew I was still there, hiding. I tried to keep the phone in my ear, but my hand was shaking so much that I could barely hold it. I looked at the street again and noticed something different. The man was closer now. You could see the outline of the beige coat, completely soaked, and the brightness of the flashlight reflecting in the puddle at his feet. He didn't move, didn't take a step, just stood there, standing still, looking at me behind that darring light. With each lightning, I saw his face for fractions of a second, his eyes wide, his chin contracted, as if he were forcing a smile. The call dropped before I could say anything, and at the same moment the flashlight beam went out. The darkness took over the store, and for a few seconds you could only hear the sound of the rain hitting the metal roof. I remained behind the counter, motionless, with my heart racing, trying to hear any sign outside. The digital clock on the refrigerator marked 2:27 a.m. when I noticed a faint glow coming from the back corridor, the light of the emergency flashlight flashing. She oscillated at a strange pace, turning on and off slowly, as if something was blocking the sensor. I approached carefully, holding an iron stick that was next to the service door. With each step, the sound of the rain seemed more distant, muffled. When I got close to the back door, the light flashed once more and went out for good, leaving me completely in the dark. I tried to turn on the cell phone flashlight, but the screen didn't respond. That's when I heard a weak sound outside, the crack of the gravel being stepped on, slow, dragged steps circling the building. I stopped breathing, trying to identify which way they were coming from, until a shadow passed in front of the small window of the door. I only had time to see the outline of the flashlight in his hand before the light turned on again, pointed straight at my face. The light went through the small glass of the door and blinded me for a second. Retreating was instinctive. I stumbled on the replacement boxes and almost fell. The beam moved slowly, sweeping the wall, as if he knew exactly where I was. I shouted that the police were on their way, but I didn't get an answer. Just the sound of the rain hitting the ground and that distant buzz of the pole transformer. When I finally managed to turn on the cell phone, the display showed no signal. I stood still, leaning against the cold wall, the stick still firm in my hand, trying to reason what to do. Suddenly, the sound stopped. No step, no rain. The silence was so complete that I could hear my own heart. I approached the door slowly and looked through the glass. There was no one. Only the weak reflection of my face mixed with the gloom outside. I took a deep breath and opened the lock carefully, ready to attack if necessary. The cold wind came in immediately, bringing the smell of wet earth and gasoline. The rain had completely stopped. And that's when I noticed something that made me lose my breath. On the floor, right in front of the door, there was a flashlight on, turned to me, and a small receipt from the station, with the date of that dawn and the word credit written by hand. Story 4. It was the kind of job no one wanted, night shift in a small supermarket in the countryside of Kansas. The place was open until morning, but between midnight and 5 o'clock, almost no one showed up. I was responsible for replenishing shelves, checking cameras, and keeping the store running, while the other 2 employees cleaned the inventory. That night, the wind was beating hard outside and the rain drummed on the metal roof, creating a constant sound that filled all the silence. It was almost 2:30 when the other employee left early, claiming that his son was sick. I was completely alone, the sound of the storm serving as the only company. While organizing the cereal section, I heard something fall in the cleaning products aisle. It was a dry, fast noise, as if a bottle had hit the floor. I took the radio to ask if the night security guard had seen something, but the device was silent. Strange. I walked to the corridor and found a bottle of disinfectant rolling slowly on the floor. The rest of the shelves were intact. I took the bottle and put it back, but the feeling that someone had passed by didn't leave my head. The fluorescent lights buzzed, oscillating with the strong wind outside, and the corridor seemed longer than usual. I went back to the cashier to check the cameras, just to make sure there was no one hanging around. The screen showed all the empty corridors, but something caught my attention. The cleaning products aisle had a shopping cart parked right in the middle, and I was sure I hadn't left it there. I advanced the recording for a few seconds, and what I saw made me freeze. The cart began to move slowly, alone, crossing the corridor until it hit lightly on the back wall. No visible person, no reflection. Just the cart sliding firmly as if someone pushed it. At the time, I tried to rationalize. The side door went straight to the loading area, so maybe the wind was coming in through some crack. Even so, that corridor was internal, far from any air current. I went there to check it out in person. The rain hit hard on the metal panels of the building, and the sound echoed through the ceiling, making the floor vibrate slightly. The cart was leaning against the wall, with one of the wheels still turning slowly. I pointed the flashlight of my cell phone and noticed wet footprint marks on the epoxy floor. Not mine. They were big, like boots, and ended exactly behind the cart. That image left me paralyzed for a few seconds. The footprints stopped abruptly as if the person had disappeared right there. The rain outside increased, and the sound of the wind passing through the roof cracks seemed to come from all sides. I bent down to take a closer look and touched the floor. It was still wet, as if someone had passed by a few minutes ago. I went back to the cashier with the intention of calling the security guard from the previous shift, but the internal phone only squealed. I took the cell phone, no signal either. All that was left was the sound of the bulbs buzzing and the rain hammering the ceiling. I sat for a moment, trying to convince myself that it had a logical explanation. Then I heard another noise, a slight squeak of wheels coming from the same corridor. I looked through the camera screen and the cart was again halfway, only now turned in the opposite direction as if it had been pushed back. I stared at the image, waiting to see someone appear, but there was nothing. That's when I noticed another detail. On the counter, right next to the monitor screen, there was something that wasn't there before. An old employee badge with a photo of a man I didn't know. The name said, T. Morgan. Below the date of dismissal, 2022, I took the badge carefully. The plastic was cold and wet, as if it had been left there a short time ago. I looked around, expecting to see someone in the cashier sector, but the supermarket was completely empty. The camera that filmed the counter showed the same thing, me alone. The heart began to beat faster. I tried to remember if any former employee had that name, but nothing came to mind. I had only been working there for a year, and I had never heard of a certain T. Morgan. I put the badge on the counter and looked back at the cameras in an attempt to find some explanation. That's when I saw a movement in the corner of the screen. The shopping cart, the same, started to slide again, now faster. He hit hard on the shelf and dropped several bottles, spreading the liquid on the floor. The sound echoed throughout the supermarket. I could clearly hear the impact even from the cashier. I went to the corridor, hesitating at every step, and the strong smell of ammonia filled the air. The light above flashed non-stop. When I got there, the cart was overturned on the floor, and right behind it, printed in the pool of cleaning product, there were new footprints. They went towards the end of the corridor and stopped in front of the employee's door, which was ajar. My whole body became tense. That door should be locked. Only those who had access were the day shift people. I walked slowly to her, with the sound of the liquid running down the floor accompanying each step. When I touched the doorknob, I felt the metal cold and wet, as if someone had just released it. I pushed carefully and looked inside. The back corridor was dark, only the red light of the fire alarm flashing at long intervals. Each flash illuminated the broom cabinets, cardboard boxes, and the cleaning cart leaning against the wall. No sign of people. No noise other than the rain. I took 2 steps inside and the door behind me closed with a sharp snap. I turned immediately, my heart beating hard. I tried to open it, but the doorknob turned falsely, as if it had locked inside. I was stuck there, breathing fast, looking at that red gloom that pulsated in the rhythm of the emergency light. That's when I heard a sound coming from the other side of the corridor. The light noise of wheels moving, a creak identical to that of the shopping cart. He had been approaching slowly. With each flash of the red light, I saw the figure of the cart appearing a little closer, until it stopped a few meters from me. And on him, hanging on the handle, was another badge, identical to the first one, but now with the name erased. The breath started to get short. That silence between each flicker of light was suffocating. I walked slowly to the cart, the sound of my steps echoing on the wet floor. The badge swayed slightly, reflecting the reddish glow of the emergency light. When I got close enough to touch it, I realized that the plastic was partially melted as if it had been burned. The face in the photo was deformed, blurred, and the bottom of the card was illegible. I put my fingertips on the badge, and at the same moment I heard the snap of the door behind me opening. I turned fast, hoping to see someone, but the corridor was empty. Only the flashing light and the storm wind passing through some crack. I left there without thinking twice, pushing the door until I returned to the main hall of the store. The noise of the rain seemed to have increased again, and the ceiling lamps flashed irregularly. I went to the counter to pick up the phone and call the manager, but I froze halfway. The badge I had left on the counter, the first one with the name T. Morgan, was no longer there. In his place, there was a wet sheet of paper written in pen. Night shift, O2, Zhao. Morgan. Story 5. Working on the early morning shift never bothered me. I've always liked the calm of the night, the empty roads and the silence that is only broken by the distant noise of the trucks passing by. My shift at the station started at midnight and ended at 6. It was a simple, isolated post on a quiet highway in the interior of Florida. On most nights, I didn't see more than 4 or 5 cars. But what started to make me uncomfortable was something I noticed always happening at the same time. 3:17 in the morning exactly. An old car, a silver sedan from the 90s, stopped at pump 3. The pattern was always the same. I heard the sound of the engine approaching slowly, then the click of the pump when the car parked. I waited a few seconds to see if anyone came down, but no one left. The internal lights were off and the dark glass prevented me from seeing the driver. After a few minutes, the engine sound increased again, and the car simply left without fueling. The first time, I thought it was someone confused or maybe a car with a problem. But when it happened 3 nights in a row, always at the same time, I started to feel something strange. That feeling that something didn't make sense, but you try to ignore it so as not to go crazy. On the 4th night, I decided to pay more attention. I kept an eye on the cashier's clock, which marked 3:16 a.m. when the engine sound appeared in the distance. It was as if the car waited for the exact time to appear. The headlights crossed the thin fog that covered the road, and soon the silver sedan parked again at pump 3. All the same, engine on, no one leaving. I waited a whole minute, watching through the window. When I decided to leave to check, the car was no longer there. No starting noise, no fresh tire marks on the ground wet by the serene. It seemed to have simply disappeared. I went back inside, trying to laugh at myself. I wrote down the time and made a record in the post's occurrence book, but to have something concrete in case I needed to tell someone. I spent the rest of the night listening to the buzzing of the refrigerators and the occasional sound of the wind hitting the price plate. The next day, I commented on the episode with the manager, who just shook his head. "Pump 3 has been isolated since last month," he said. "You shouldn't even turn on the display." That bothered me. I had seen the car stop there, the pump dial blinked, and the sound of the engine was real. It was impossible to have imagined all that. The next night I decided to test something. I arrived at work a few minutes before the time and left my cell phone camera pointed at pump 3, recording. I wanted to have a proof, something that showed what I saw every morning. The clock was 3:14 a.m. when I began to feel that same strange silence, the kind of silence that anticipates something. Even with the sound of the refrigerator, you could notice the change in the air, as if the entire environment was paused. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the lighthouse appeared again, crossing the road and illuminating the wet track. The silver sedan approached slowly, stopped at the pump, and kept the engine running. I took the cell phone and continued recording with the zoom on the car. I waited. No door opened. The lights on the vehicle's dashboard flashed slightly, and you could hear the constant sound of the engine. I decided to leave the store. The air outside was heavy, humid, with the smell of old rain mixed with the diesel from the pumps. Every step I took seemed louder than usual. When I got close to the car, I realized that the windows were completely dark, as if they were mirrored inside. I brought my face closer to the driver's window, and that's when I realized that there was no one there. The engine was still on, The fuel pointer shook, but the car was empty. I took a step back, trying to understand what I was seeing. I opened my mouth to call someone, but I remembered that I was alone. I looked inside once again. The front seats were clean, the passengers with a dark spot on the fabric, but no sign of person. The steering wheel moved slightly, vibrating with the engine, and the air conditioning blew a cold wind, with a light smell of gasoline and mold. The rain began to fall again, dripping slowly on the hood. I could hear the sound of the windshield wiper even though it was off. It was as if the sound was coming from inside, not from outside. My instinct was to turn around, but something made me look at the car's dashboard. The lights flashed in a strange pattern, and the digital clock marked 3:17 a.m., stuck, without changing the minute. I stood there, stopped, hypnotized, until I realized that the engine had stopped making noise. The silence that came after was suffocating. I moved away a little and noticed another detail that made me freeze. There were no footprints around the car. Not even mine. The concrete floor was completely dry, as if the rain didn't touch it. I took the cell phone to shoot again, but the screen was black, locked, and the display reflected only the brightness of the headlights on. Headlights that now pointed directly at me. The light from the headlights blinded me for a moment. I raised my arm to protect my face, and when I lowered it, the car was a little closer. I hadn't heard the engine start, nor tires moving. It was simply closer. The sound of the wind increased and the rain began to fall harder. I retreated slowly with my heart racing until I leaned against the wall of the store. I looked around, looking for some reflection, some explanation, but all I saw was the brightness of the headlights overshadowing my eyes. That's when I realized something that froze me inside. The sound of the engine had returned, but now it came from behind me, not from the car. I turned slowly, my whole body goosebumps. Inside, through the window of the store, the lights flashed. The sound of the engine came from the cashier under the counter, as if something was on there. I ran in, the floor wet under my feet, and the noise increased, deep, continuous. The light from the gas station oscillated, and the reflection of the glass showed the empty pump 3. The car was no longer there. Only the sound of the engine remained, coming from inside the store. I lowered it to look under the counter and found my cell phone still recording, vibrating on the locked screen. The video showed the car stopped at pump 3, engine off, but the headlights lighting up by themselves, blinking at intervals of 1 second. And inside the reflection, the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat, looking directly at the camera. Story 6. The sound seemed louder, closer. I paused the TV to hear better. It was the same chair drag, only this time accompanied by a rhythmic touch, as if something hit the floor lightly. 3 beats spaced, then silence. I turned up the volume of the cell phone to record the sound, but the microphone picked up almost nothing but the hissing environment. Even so, the noise was too clear to be my imagination. When the clock struck exactly 10 p.m., it stopped, as if it had been timed. I stared at the ceiling for a while, and then tried to sleep, but the sound of the wood cracking above the bed didn't let me sleep. The next morning, I met the syndic in the parking lot and asked casually who lived in the apartment above. She made a strange expression, hesitated for a few seconds, and replied, "No one. Apartment 201 has been empty since January." I laughed, thinking she had misunderstood, but she continued. "The former tenant, Mr. Harper, he passed away here. The son still hasn't been able to rent the property." At that moment, I felt a chill rise up the back of my neck. I went back to my apartment, trying not to think too much about it. But that night, when the clock struck 10 p.m., the noise came back. The same dragged sound, the same rhythm. This time, the noise sounded different, heavier, as if the chair was being pushed from one side to the other with force. I took a broom and hit the ceiling, trying to indicate that there was someone underneath. The sound stopped for a moment and I breathed a sigh of relief. But seconds later, I heard something that froze my blood. The sound of an identical beat coming from upstairs, in the same rhythm as my blows, as if someone had answered. I stood still in the middle of the room, holding the broom, with my heart beating too hard to be able to think. The noise suddenly stopped, and silence filled the apartment again. I couldn't sleep that night. With each snap of the building, I turned around in bed, hoping to hear the sound again. When the day dawned, I went up the stairs and stopped in front of the door of 201. The paint on the door was peeling and the lock looked rusty, as if no one had used it in a long time. I touched my ear and stayed there for a whole minute. No sound, no movement. Curiosity, however, has not passed. When I returned to my apartment and turned on the TV to muffle the silence, I noticed something that made me freeze. The sound of the chair started again, but now it was lower, and it seemed to come from my own ceiling just above the bed. The sound was constant, rhythmic, as if someone dragged the chair a few centimeters, stopped, and then made the same movement again. I lay down, motionless, looking at the ceiling. With each movement, the plaster vibrated slightly, releasing small particles of dust. I took the cell phone and turned on the recorder, but the noise seemed to disappear every time I pressed record. When he stood, he came back. I started to think that I could be getting paranoid. Around 11 p.m., the sound stopped again, and this time completely. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, trying to sleep. That's when I heard something different, a sound coming not from above but from the corridor right outside my door. I got up slowly, barefoot, and walked to the entrance. The light from the corridor passed through the lower crack, illuminating the tip of my feet. I touched my ear to the wood and heard the same noise. The chair being dragged, now outside. I opened the door in an impulse, my heart racing, and the corridor was empty. The sound had stopped the moment I turned the doorknob. I walked to the stairs, looked up, and saw the upstairs completely dark. No light on, no shadow moving. Only the sound of the wind passing through the window at the end of the corridor. When I closed the door and turned around, the noise came back, exactly above me, accompanied by a long creak, as if the chair had been turned. I ran to the middle of the room and looked at the ceiling. The sound was so clear that I could imagine the weight of the chair being pushed back and forth. This time it wasn't a light drag sound, it was rough, forced, as if someone was pushing the furniture with anger. I took the broom again and hit it hard, screaming to stop. Silence came immediately. The kind of silence that makes the air heavy, where you can hear your own blood running in your ear. I stood there looking at the ceiling until I noticed something strange. Small cracks began to appear, right at the point where the sound came from. I approached slowly. The cracks increased, releasing a thin powder that fell on the sofa. Before I could do anything, a dry snap echoed, loud enough to make me retreat. The sound was followed by another lower, similar to the wooden drag being pushed slowly. But this time it didn't come from the ceiling. It was from inside my own apartment, right behind me. I turned slowly and saw, leaning against the wall, a wooden chair, mine, which was always in the kitchen. It was slightly turned, as if it had been pushed. I stared for long seconds, unable to move until the noise started again. Only now, both upstairs and inside my apartment at the same time. The duplicate sound was unbearable, the same dry drag echoing from the ceiling and floor, almost in sync. The lamps began to flash, projecting fast shadows on the walls. I stepped back until I leaned against the entrance door, feeling the cold wood on my back and trying to understand what was happening. Every time the noise stopped, I held my breath, waiting for everything to end, but soon I came back, louder, closer. It was then that I noticed something impossible. The kitchen chair, which I had seen standing still, was a few centimeters closer to me. I tried to rationalize. It could have slipped with the vibration, with the wind, anything. But when I took a step forward, she moved again, slowly, dragging on the floor, to the same rhythm of the sound that came from the ceiling. I screamed, pushed the chair to the corner, and ran out of the apartment. I went up the stairs with my heart racing, and when I got to the door of 201, I saw that it was ajar. Inside, the apartment was completely dark, except for a wooden chair positioned right in the center of the room, facing down. And on the floor, there was a carpet covered with dust, with 2 sharp footmarks pointed straight to where I was standing. Story 7. That night, the wind was beating so hard that the windows of the building vibrated. It was almost 3 in the morning, and I was the only one on duty on the security shift. The building was in downtown Seattle, an office building that at night seemed completely abandoned. The automatic underground parking lights turned on by sensors, so from time to time I saw a flash on the monitor and knew that some car had passed or that a cat had entered. But on that rainy dawn, what caught my attention was different. While I was watching the cameras, one of the screens flashed fast and showed movement underground. I enlarged the image and saw someone walking slowly between the rows of cars. The body was covered by a hood, and the posture was strange, as if it were slightly curved. I spoke through the intercom. "Sir, the parking lot is closed. Can I help you?" The person kept walking, passing behind an SUV and then disappearing from the image. I thought it was some late employee, but something bothered me. I didn't hear the sound of any car coming in, nor the automatic gate opening. I took the radio and went down the stairs towards the basement. The sound of my footsteps echoed on the concrete walls, mixed with the constant noise of the rain beating outside and the buzzing of the air fans. When I got to the garage, the air was humid and cold, with that characteristic smell of oil and rust. The fluorescent lights flashed at long intervals, creating brief moments of total darkness. I called again, the voice coming out a little trembling through the corridor. "Sir, the parking lot is closed. I need you to identify yourself." Just the distant sound of a drip coming from some burst pipe. I walked between the cars, observing the reflections on the wet bodywork. The feeling of being watched was strong. From time to time, some light flashed on the ceiling, and I saw something move in the corner of the vision, a quick shadow passing between the columns. I thought about going back to the cabin and calling for reinforcements, but something made me move on. When I got close to the firebomb, I noticed one of the side exit doors ajar. The sign said, "Restricted access." She swayed slightly in the wind, making an annoying metallic sound. I approached slowly, the flashlight shaking in my hand. That's when I heard the sound, the alarm of a car firing somewhere further down. The sound of the alarm echoed through the empty parking lot, repeating itself between the concrete columns and the parked cars. It was hard to say where it came from. The echo made it look like it came from everywhere. I walked fast, trying to follow the sound, but at every turn he seemed to move away. The light of the flashlight trembled, reflecting in the mirrors, creating figures that made me turn everywhere. The rain outside mixed with the muffled sound of the alarm, and the air began to get heavier with that strong smell of wet rubber. I passed by a row of cars and saw something move between them. A human shadow, sharp, passing too fast to be confused with a reflection. I pointed at the flashlight, but there was no one. Only the sound of the alarm, now lower, and the flashing of the red lights reflecting on the columns. I approached slowly, my heart speeding up with every step. When I arrived at the place where I thought the movement had happened, I noticed something strange on the floor. Wet, sharp footprints, but without a defined direction, as if someone had walked in circles. And right ahead, the side door still ajar, swinging slowly with the wind coming from outside. I pushed the door with my elbow, and it creaked loudly, echoing throughout the parking lot. I pointed the flashlight through the gap and saw only a narrow staircase going down to the maintenance level, a sector that, as far as I knew, had been banned for months. The air that came from there was colder and had a strong smell of mold and rust. I thought about calling on the radio, but the interference was so strong that all that came out was a continuous hiss. The sound of the alarm had stopped, and the silence that followed was so absolute that I even heard my own breath reverberate on the walls. I took a step inside and went down 2 steps just to look better. The flashlight light oscillated and revealed dark marks on the wall, such as scratches. Further down, I noticed something hanging on the railing. A wet jacket, one of those safety but without identification. The fabric dripped slowly, and for some reason it made me more nervous than any shadow. I took a step back, and it was at that moment that I noticed, reflected on the side glass of a car next to me, the clear contour of someone standing right behind me. I turned my body quickly, but the space was empty. Just the wind, the door slamming, and the weak sound of an engine turning on by itself somewhere further away from the parking lot. The sound of the engine increased slowly, as if someone was accelerating slightly, but no headlight light would come on. I walked between the cars, trying to identify where it came from. With each step, the noise seemed to change direction, sometimes coming from the left, sometimes from the right. The echo of the concrete made everything confusing, and my flashlight was already starting to fail. I passed by a white SUV and noticed something strange on the windshield. A dark mark, similar to a hand. I leaned the flashlight closer and saw that it was a recent impression, still wet, as if someone had just touched the glass inside. My chest tightened. I looked around and realized that several windows had the same type of brand on different cars, all on the inside of the glass, all with the shape of open hands. And then the sound of the engine suddenly stopped, replaced by a lower one. Steps, slow, echoing between the columns. I got down behind a car and pointed the flashlight forward. The light swept the wet floor and stopped at a specific point, a human, sharp shadow projected on the wall. She moved slowly, moving from one car to another, but there was no body that produced her. Only the contour of the figure walking between the vehicles until it disappears completely. I was down for long seconds, my heart beating loud enough for me to hear inside my ears. What I had seen didn't make sense. There was no one there, but the shadow kept moving by itself. I took a deep breath and ran back to the service elevator. The dashboard lights were flashing and the ground floor button didn't respond. The noise of the elevator stopped in the well sounded like a distant metallic moan. I decided to go up the stairs, but before leaving, I looked at the car area for the last time. And that's when I realized the exit door, the one that was leaning, was now fully open. I pointed the flashlight in her direction, and the light illuminated the wet floor. In the reflection of the floor, I could see something moving, like the brightness of someone walking, but without a body, only the reflection of steps. I walked to the door slowly, and the sound of footsteps ceased again. The light flashed, and for a brief moment, the entire parking lot seemed dark. When he returned, all the hand marks had disappeared from the windows. Only the distant sound of the storm outside remained. I left there as fast as I could, and when I looked at the office cameras, I saw the live recording from the basement. In the corner of the screen between two cars, the shadow was still there, standing still and facing the camera, even with no one there to project it. Story 8. The house was small, with 2 floors and a laundry in the back, where the sound of the washing machine always muffled the rest of the world. I lived there for just over 3 months, and I liked the quiet routine of the neighborhood. The street was silent, lit only by a distant pole, and at night the only sound came from the wind passing through the trees. That Thursday I decided to put clothes to wash later than usual, around 10:30. The cold laundry floor made my bare feet shiver, and the monotonous noise of the spinning machine ended up making me sleepy. That's when I heard the beats. They were light, as if someone touched the glass with their fingertips. I turned around at the time thinking it was the branch of some tree, but the window overlooked the backyard, where there was nothing nearby. The yellow light of the lamp reflected my own face on the glass, which made it difficult to see outside. I waited, in silence, my heart starting to speed up, and then I heard again, 3 short beats, and the reflection of something moving. It was fast, but I clearly saw the silhouette of someone bending down, disappearing under the window. My first instinct was to turn off the machine. The sound of the engine stopped, and the silence that settled was heavy, almost suffocating. I stood there still, trying to listen to anything outside. Just the wind and the distant noise of a dog barking on another street. I took the cell phone and on the flashlight, pointing at the glass. The brightness reflected back, blinding me for a second. When I managed to focus, there was no one. Just the dark backyard and the ivor-covered fence swaying slightly. Still, something told me that I wasn't alone. I approached slowly and opened the window just enough to look outside. The cold night air came in, carrying the smell of wet earth. The backyard lamp blinked from time to time, and the rest was completely dark. I was listening, motionless, until I heard the sound of a light step, very close, the discreet snap of someone stepping on the cement floor. I retreated and closed the window tightly, the glass vibrating with the impact. I ran inside, locking the laundry door. I went up to the room, trying to convince myself that it was just some neighbor passing by. But the image of that reflection bending down didn't leave my head. All night I slept badly, waking up several times with the feeling of hearing noises coming from downstairs. The house creaked more than usual, and with each snap I held my breath, trying to distinguish the sound of the wind from something else. When the sun started to rise, I was finally able to relax. I went down around 7, still a little dizzy with sleep, and went straight to the kitchen to make coffee. When I passed by the laundry, my stomach turned. The floor was covered with marks. They were wet, sharp footprints with big shoes going from the window to the inner door of the house. I approached slowly, not believing what I saw. The window was closed, but the protective screen was torn from top to bottom, and the fabric hung wet, as if someone had passed by. I touched the marks on the floor, still wet. I went back inside trembling, checked all the doors and windows, and everything seemed intact. No sign of breaking in, nothing out of place. Just those footprints, ending at the laundry door. I took my cell phone to call the police, but the sound I heard made me freeze. 3 light knocks coming from exactly the same window where everything started the night before. The phone almost slipped out of my hand. The sound of the beats was identical to the night before, spaced, calm, as if the person on the other side was sure I was listening. I ran to the living room and stood still, listening from afar. With each beat, the noise seemed closer, firmer. I tried to find the courage to go to the laundry, but the fear stopped me. I took a knife from the drawer and, taking a deep breath, I followed silently down the corridor. When I arrived at the door, the sound had stopped. I waited a few seconds and pushed slowly. The morning light came in through the window, illuminating the floor still wet by the footprints. I looked at the glass, and that's when I realized something different. In the middle of the dirt outside, someone had drawn something with his finger. 3 vertical lines side by side and a scratch crossing them all, as if it were a counting mark. The breath got stuck in the throat. I closed the curtains, locked the door, and called the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the entire backyard but found nothing. Just the same shoe marks, going to the wall and stopping there, as if the person had disappeared. Story 9. I had been driving for almost 10 hours straight when I decided to stop. The first motel I found was on the edge of an almost deserted road in the interior of Kansas. It was simple, with a flashing sign and a parking lot full of puddles of water. It was raining thinly and the air seemed heavy, humid, that kind that sticks to clothes. The receptionist was an old man, quiet, who handed me the key without asking many questions. I stayed in room 12, on the 2nd floor, overlooking the road. The room was small, the carpet was damp, and the smell of mold impregnated the curtains. All I wanted was to take a shower and sleep. It was almost 2 in the morning when I went to bed. The sound of the rain hitting the window rocked me, and the air conditioning buzzed loudly, muffling any other noise. I think I slept for about 20 minutes until I heard something that made me open my eyes. 3 dry knocks on the wall, coming from the next room. At first I thought it was the plumbing or some guest awake, but the sound came back, now stronger, rhythmic, as if someone was hitting with a closed fist, trying to get attention. I got up, leaned my ear against the wall, and heard something that made me freeze. A low voice, almost a whisper, saying, "Help." The room was small, and the sound of the rain hitting the parking lot awning made everything seem even more isolated. The cell phone clock marked 2:43 a.m. when I woke up with the first beats, 3 dry, fast blows, coming from the wall to the right of the bed. At first, I thought it was a pipe or the wind shaking some structure of the building. I turned to the side and closed my eyes, trying to go back to sleep, but the beats started again, this time stronger, almost desperate. They seemed to come exactly from the headboard, as if someone was on the other side, hitting directly against the wall. I sat on the bed and listened. There was a pattern. 3 short beats, 1 pause, then 2 more. And then a muffled voice, almost a moan, as if someone was trying to call for help, but without strength. I turned on the TV to try to disguise the sound, but it continued, firm, at the same rhythm. I took the phone from the room and dialed the reception extension. The sleepy voice of the attendant answered on the other side. I asked if there was anyone staying in room 11, which was glued to mine. There was a long pause before the answer. "Sir, room 11 is empty. No one has been staying there for weeks." I was silent for a few seconds, thinking he was playing with me. I asked if he was sure, and he replied with an even lower voice. "It's locked, sir. The keys are kept here with me." The noise continued on the other side of the wall while he spoke. Firm knocks, now faster, as if the person had heard our conversation and wanted to prove to me that he was there. The throat dried up. I thanked him and hung up the phone, not knowing what to do. The idea of going to the hallway crossed my mind, but something told me not to leave that room. The sound persisted, and between one sequence and another, I began to hear something different, a soft scratch like nails in the plaster. I leaned my ear against the wall and heard a short, irregular breath coming from there. That was enough. I took my cell phone and started recording the audio, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. In the first second of the recording, the sound was clear, beats, breathing, and a slight murmur. I played it to confirm, and the audio was completely silent. No noise. The heart beat so fast that I could feel the pulsation in my neck. The rain outside got stronger, and the sound of the drops against the window seemed to mix with the knocks on the wall. I got up slowly and walked to the door, determined to check the corridor. The doorknob was cold, and the air outside seemed colder than usual. The corridor was empty, only the red light of the exit sign reflecting on the waxed floor. I went to the door of room 11 and touched my ear. Neither breathing nor steps, only the distant sound of the rain and the buzzing of fluorescent lamps. I bent down and looked through the bottom crack of the door. Dark. But there was something there. A shadow, motionless, right in the middle of the room. It was as if someone was standing, ferrying the door without moving. Retreating was instinctive. I went back to my room quickly, locking the door and pushing the chair against the handle. The clock marked 3:12 a.m. The beats had stopped, and for a few minutes the silence made me believe that everything was over. Until I heard the sound of the wall latch cracking as if the structure was expanding, and then a single muffled sound, a strong blow, from inside the wall. I stood in the middle of the room not knowing where to look. The blow was so strong that the mirror of the dressing table even vibrated. A dense, almost physical silence. I took my cell phone and tried to call the reception again, but this time no one answered. The call dropped straight, as if the phone was off the hook. I looked at the ceiling, the floor, the window. Everything looked the same, but the air was different, colder, and the smell of humidity came from somewhere near the wall. I approached slowly, touched my hand, and felt the paint was damp, wet, as if there was water leaking from inside. I moved away quickly, my heart racing. I went to the window to see if it was raining too much, but the storm had subsided. The drops fell slowly, and the road outside was completely empty. When I looked back at the bedroom mirror, I noticed the reflection of what looked like a shadow moving on the wall next to the bed. I came immediately. There was nothing. But the sound came back, this time softer. Light beats, spaced, coming from inside the wall. And among them, something that made me freeze completely. A dragged whisper, almost voiceless, saying, "Still here." I felt my legs weaken. I slowly moved away from the wall, staring at the point where the sound came from. The beats continued, but now they seemed closer, as if something was moving inside the structure, between the plaster and the masonry. I took my things in a hurry, trying to ignore the chill that went up the back of my neck. The moment I opened the door to leave, the bedroom lamp flashed twice and went out. Everything went dark. The silence was broken by a last sound, not knocks but a long scratch which ran through the entire wall until it stopped exactly next to the door where I was standing. I opened the door and ran to the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The lights flashed and the floor shone with the water that flowed from my clothes. I went down the stairs without looking back and knocked on the reception door until the attendant appeared. He looked at me scared, and before I said anything, he said, "Did room 11 make noise again?" Frozen, I asked what he meant. He lowered his head and replied, "The last guest who stayed there called saying the same thing. When we went to see, the wall was hollow, as if someone had hid inside. Since then, we have left the room empty."
Thank you for staying until the end of this video. It's amazing to have you here accompanying me until the end of the stories. If you liked it, leave your comment telling what was the story that moved you the most. And if you are not yet registered, sign up so you don't miss the next ones. Until next night of scary stories.